During World War II, San Francisco's California School of Fine Arts, under the direction of artist William Gaw, faced declining enrollment and tight budgets. The school, serving more women than men and offering a solid but conventional curriculum, struggled to keep its doors open. Then, after the war, veterans supported by GI Bill benefits enrolled in large numbers. A new director, Douglas McKagy, seized the moment, inviting out-of-town artists including Mark Rothko and Clifford Still to teach, and opening the curriculum to advanced modernism. In short order, students like John Grillo, a Navy veteran whom McKagy gave a private studio, began to paint abstractly. After viewing the eye-popping San Francisco show of Clifford Still in 1947, most of the school's students and teachers followed suit. Although the term abstract expressionism, first used on the East Coast in 1946, might now be applied to their work, San Francisco critics created many forgotten labels to describe the myriad styles of abstract painting that appeared. Freeform, first sensation, spiritism, amorphous chromaticism, and most notoriously, the blob school, which at one time included Elmer Bischoff, Hasselschmidt, and David Park. While San Francisco's vanguard artists experimented with abstraction, a powerful mode of representation, imported from Europe, was making its presence felt. Expressionism, an anxious, inner-directed style that had been banned by the Nazis, found a receptive audience in the Bay Area. Expressionism arrived in San Francisco largely due to the efforts of Dr. Walter Heil, the German-born director of the de Young Museum. 3 traveling retrospectives that he helped bring to the de Young: Max Beckmann in 1948, Oskar Kokoschka in 1949, and Edvard Munch in 1951, left indelible impressions and proved influential to several key artists of the Bay Area figurative movement. Expressionism, which first emerged in Northern Europe in the late 19th century, depicted the anxieties of modern life. Expressionists saw the city as a sordid place of alienation, best suited to banking and prostitution. They took solace in nature, fantasizing a return to Eden. Some painted exotic stylized nudes, while others rendered the devastation of modern warfare. German expressionists excelled in printmaking and created graphic images of grief and loss. Most were left-leaning bohemians, but one, Emil Nolde, was a card-carrying Nazi. More interested in feeling than in refinement, their paintings used color and line with unsettling boldness. Max Beckmann, who is often called an expressionist, even though he detested the term, once said, "It is not the subject that matters, but the translation of the subject into the abstraction of the surface by means of painting." In 1937, the Austrian expressionist Oskar Kokoschka, who was living in Prague, was invited to teach at Mills College in Oakland. The invitation came from his friend, Dr. Alfred Neumayer, a German expatriate who was the college's gallery director. When Kokoschka backed out due to illness in early June, he got an angry letter from Neumayer and was replaced by Lionel Feininger, an American-born artist who had taught at the Bauhaus. That June, while Feininger lectured at Mills, 22 of his paintings and 8 by Kokoschka were shown in the Nazi-organized Degenerate Art Exhibition designed to mock modern art. Kokoschka's self-portrait as a degenerate artist, painted in Prague, transmits a mixture of anxiety and pride. It includes images of a running man and a stag, symbols of the artist's sense of being hunted. When Kokoschka fled Prague for London a year later, he left behind more than 600 paintings, many of which were later destroyed in the 1945 firebombing of Dresden. While the Nazis persecuted modern artists in Europe, their art gained attention in the United States. In the fall of 1938, a group of Beckmann paintings, including Departure, was shown at the San Francisco Museum of Art before traveling to the Crocker Gallery in Sacramento. There, gallery director Harry Noyes Pratt told a reporter that viewers would find Beckmann's work offensive at first glance, but would then recognize imagination, fantasy, and power. 6 months later, when Beckmann's Temptation was shown at San Francisco's Golden Gate Exposition on Treasure Island, the reaction was decidedly mixed. The triptych won a $1,000 first prize in the foreign division, but an anonymous exposition official complained to the Oakland Tribune that he found it aggressively bad. At the 1940 exposition, a suite of Beckmann paintings including The King were on display, alongside a group of Kokoschkas that included the 1909 canvas Dr. Tietze and his wife. After the war, in July of 1946, a self-portrait appeared in a Beckmann exhibition at the San Francisco Museum of Art. Confrontational and intense, it had been painted in Amsterdam, where Beckmann had fled the day after the opening of Degenerate Art. It is an image of resilience and survival, painted by an artist in exile who had now endured 2 devastating wars. The show also included a Beckmann triptych, Acrobats. A claustrophobic circus interior, jammed with more than a dozen vivid characters, Acrobats presents a dark view of human nature and symbolizes the risky life of an artist. One reviewer called the work extravagantly harsh, grotesque, and ugly. The Beckmann paintings seen in San Francisco had been loaned by Kurt Valentin at the Buchholz Gallery, a German-Jewish art dealer who arrived in the U.S. in 1937. It was later revealed that Valentin, who played an important role in bringing German Expressionism to the U.S., had been secretly authorized by the Nazis to sell modern art to provide funds for Hitler's war efforts. In 1947, Beckmann, his wife Quapi, and their dog Butchie arrived in St. Louis, where Beckmann had been hired to teach at Washington University. After describing his difficult years in occupied Holland, the 62-year-old artist told a reporter, "Let's put such memories aside. They are too horrible." Just 10 years earlier, the Nazis had held up Beckmann's work to ridicule, but in post-war St. Louis, a city steeped in German-American culture, Girl Scout Troop No. 19 visited his exhibition and earned credit toward merit badges in art. In May of 1948, a Beckmann retrospective, curated by Perry Rathbone, opened at the City Museum of St. Louis before traveling to 5 other cities, including San Francisco. Consisting of 47 oil paintings, 45 watercolors, and 41 prints, it spanned 40 years of the artist's career. Beckmann, who had never seen so much of his work together, attended the St. Louis opening and posed with Quapi in front of their 1941 double portrait. Because post-war anti-German sentiment was still strong, as the show traveled, supportive critics emphasized Beckmann's status as an anti-Nazi whose paintings protested the inhumanity of their times. The earliest painting in the show, a 1906 portrait of the artist's mother, when contrasted with the newest, a portrait of his wife, shows how Beckmann's style had evolved over 4 decades. Christ and the Woman Taken in Adultery, painted after Beckmann was forever changed by his experience as a medic during World War I, had been shown at the Degenerate Art exhibition and was miraculously recovered and brought to the U.S. His 1920 family picture, painted in Frankfurt, was made when Beckmann associated himself with a movement called New Objectivity, which favored harsh and satirical treatment of German subjects. There was also his smirking portrait of the Russian actor Tseretelli that the Nazis had removed from the State Museum in Dresden. The Skaters, painted in 1932, hints at sinister undercurrents running beneath winter festivities. Departure, Beckmann's allegory of escape from political oppression, which San Francisco Chronicle art critic Alfred Frankenstein recalled seeing 8 years earlier, was one of 3 triptychs in the show. Another was Blind Man's Buff, Beckmann's largest triptych, painted by candlelight in Amsterdam during the difficult final year of the war. The Mill, an allegorical painting that shows human figures lashed to the blades of a windmill behind a couple bound in a cage, may relate to the artist's childhood associations, as his father had been a mill owner. Alfred Frankenstein's review of the show was mainly descriptive and somewhat ambivalent. The Beckmann galleries, he wrote, seem at first glance to be hung with the productions of a philosophic if legendary giant who has learned to paint with an axe. In April of 1949, the first comprehensive U.S. exhibition of Oskar Kokoschka, 62 paintings, 54 lithographs, 9 illustrated books, and a painted clay sculpture, arrived at the de Young Museum. Kokoschka, a Viennese bad boy, established his reputation early with a series of tremulous, psychologically charged portraits. In 1910, he created a self-portrait as a Christ-like figure with a stigmata. During World War I, when he was bayoneted in the shoulder by a Russian, the wound became reality. A romantic whose gestural brushwork radiated emotional energy, he created his masterpiece, Bride of the Wind, at the request of his mistress Anna Mahler, who said she would marry him when it was completed. The marriage never happened, and the distraught painter had a companion doll made in Alma's image, which he took to cafes and to the opera until destroying it at a party. After the war, the shell-shocked painter moved to Dresden, where he became a professor at the Art Academy. His brushwork became broader, and he returned to painting nudes and portraits, including one of dancer Fred Astaire's sister, Adele. Completed after many sittings and quite a bit of flirtation, Kokoschka never let Adele see the painting. When he saw it years later, her brother Fred called it a hideous mess. Kokoschka called his sitters my victims, and once explained, I have to break through the secret law and pattern of each person as if I were using a can opener. His landscapes, painted from an omnipotent bird's-eye point of view, were as alive as his portraits. The society women who gathered at the de Young Museum for tea and a Kokoschka lecture by Dr. Alfred Neumeyer might have relished the chance to fall victim to his nimble brush, but Kokoschka never came to California. Max Beckmann, on the other hand, would arrive the following year to teach a 1950 summer session at Mills College. Beckmann's works had been selling to collectors and museums, and he had won a $1,500 Carnegie Prize for his painting, Fisherwomen. After leaving St. Louis, he had taught in Colorado and then in Brooklyn before arriving in California. At Mills, Beckmann taught a group of about 30 students, men and women of all ages. Because his English was poor, Quappy often translated Beckmann's comments to students. They very likely heard advice similar to that he had given to his students in St. Louis. The important things in art are individuality, a love for the visible world, and finding the deep secrets of your real self. While dining with Beckmann in mid-July, his friend Alfred Neumeyer looked towards Beckmann and studied his appearance. An immensely complex man. It was the face of a suffering man, with deep shadows under his eyes, with the expression of tired nervousness on his head, whose brutal proportions made this expression unbelievable and touching. 21-year-old Nathan Oliveira, who signed up for Beckmann's class, was fascinated by Beckmann's seriousness and commitment. Oliveira also witnessed a shocking teaching moment that he never forgot. It involved Beckmann's response to a sweet, sentimental painting of a house and garden that an older woman in the class had been working on for 2 weeks. Without asking, he stepped up to her palette, got the largest brush he could find in the dirty turpentine, and then splurted out a big goopy wad of black onto the palette. The dear little woman stepped back in horror when he splashed a puddle of turps with the brush into the black. She almost fainted when he then made huge black marks across the face of her little house with a rose-entwined fence. He dropped the brush and went on his way, saying to her, "More black." Beckmann, in poor health and greatly worried about the Korean War, left California in mid-August. Later in New York, he painted a glowing city view of San Francisco with a rising yellow moon. On December 27, 1950, while walking to visit the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where his self-portrait in a blue jacket had been put on display, the 66-year-old artist died of a sudden heart attack. On the same day that Beckmann died, James S. Plout, the director of Boston's Institute of Contemporary Art, was awarded a Knight's Cross by the King of Norway for organizing the first American exhibition of Edvard Munch, a Norwegian expressionist who was virtually unknown in the United States. Munch, who had been an active, prolific artist until his death at the age of 80 in 1944, left behind over 1,600 paintings. Because he had often painted and stored his work outside, many were found in extremely poor condition. Still, because Munch often painted key images as many as 6 times, the show's organizers in Oslo were able to assemble a reasonable cross-section of his work. The 64 paintings and 107 works on paper that comprised the show, chosen from the artist's estate and insured for $500,000, had arrived on the SS Stavanger Fjord in March and had gone on display in Boston in April. Munch, whose early training had been conventional, had endured a miserable childhood that could not be described by academic realism. He had watched his mother's slow death from tuberculosis at the age of 5, endured his father's descent into religious fanaticism, and harbored a lifelong fear of becoming insane. Travels to Paris and Berlin and exposure to Impressionism gave him the tools to render his melancholy in flowing, color-charged vignettes. When his nerves were most frayed, Munch made his most original work, including the now iconic Scream. He projected his anxieties onto Norwegian crowds, painting them as bourgeois zombies. His Madonna, who wears a blood-red hat, is both a seductress and a femme fatale. His vampire exudes a peculiar fear of the artist that women wanted to steal his bodily fluids. Munch's unforgettable canvas, Puberty, which shows a solemn young woman waking up to discover her first menstrual period, argues that sexual maturity is the beginning of a nightmare. As if to underscore that point, his painting Ashes shows a couple who have gone from the heat of passion to total burnout. In mid-career, Munch painted male subjects that offered some hope in the form of physical vitality. When he painted Manhood, the center panel of a triptych depicting 3 ages of life, he joined his nude subjects on the beach, wearing a loincloth as he worked. The subdued first version of The Sick Child, painted in 1885, did not travel to the U.S. A brighter, bolder version, painted 4 decades later, did, offering Americans a glimpse of Munch's late style. Indeed, his 1929 Nude by an Armchair, standing in a yellow interior with violet shadows, must have pleased viewers in each of the 5 cities where it appeared. And just how did the Munch show look to the busy citizens of 1951 San Francisco? According to critic Alfred Frankenstein, Munch looked more modern than Picasso. David Park's Kids on Bikes, the painting that launched Bay Area figuration, is not an expressionist painting. It doesn't have the biting bitterness of a Beckmann or the psychic buzz of a Kokoschka, but it is still tempting to ask, did expressionistic work play a role in Park's return to figuration? In March of 1951, when Kids on Bikes was hanging in the San Francisco Museum of Art, the recipient of a $250 prize, you could have taken a 10-minute cab ride to the de Young and seen the Munch retrospective. You have to wonder, did Park see it? His biographer, Nancy Boas, thinks it likely that Park saw all three de Young retrospectives, but if he did, his comments about them were never recorded. Park's paintings, however, have a few things to say. They hint at what might be called influence by osmosis, a gradual absorption of Expressionist moods and subjects into the fabric of Park's art. There are numerous indications that the experience of works by Beckmann, Kokoschka, and Munch left impressions that gradually shaped Park's work during the final decade of his career. In his subjects and in the feelings they emanate, there are indeed striking connections. Elmer Bischoff, who turned from abstraction to figuration a year after Park, acknowledged the influence of Edvard Munch and had learned from Munch's ability to dramatize isolated figures in landscape settings. And clearly, Max Beckmann's work had also made a strong impression on Bischoff. Richard Diebenkorn, who was living in New Mexico during the Kokoschka and Munch shows, was most influenced by French painting, but may have been exposed to Munch by his friends. And Joan Brown, who once painted herself holding a large fish, seems to have channeled a bit of Max Beckmann. Nathan Oliveira was shaped by all three Expressionist retrospectives and by his personal contact with Max Beckmann. From Munch, he came to understand the possibility of using single figures and their settings as stages for symbolic drama. He also greatly admired Munch's prints and used them as starting points for personal variations. Throughout his career, Oliveira shared the story of Max Beckmann applying black paint to the canvas of a stunned student. It was a kind of Zen moment for the young artist who never forgot that more black was needed to paint life's dark shadows, where hidden secrets might be lurking, waiting to be revealed by art.